All right, now we've talked at length about the role that data has, where we get our data, and then how we make our write-ups in the logbooks of the aircraft that we work on. There's one other clerical thing that we need to cover before we can really kind of start tearing into doing aircraft maintenance. We document maintenance through a variety of ways, and sometimes one of those ways is FAA forms. Now, each one has a different purpose and use, and we're going to go through several of them. You need to be comfortable navigating these and doing them correctly, because what you could do is have the form filled out incorrectly, and then cause problems for your customers, cause problems for yourself, or simply just delay the process. If you're waiting on something to come back, or you're waiting on something to get approved, and it gets kicked back because you did something incorrectly, well, you're just burning time for everyone. And so it's better to be comfortable with them, know how to find the different ACs that kind of walk you through there if you have a question, and just be comfortable doing paperwork, because you're going to do a lot of it. That is the unwritten truth of aircraft maintenance, is that like about a third of the time is you sitting behind a computer typing away or hand jamming something, depending on where you're at. All right, so the first one we're going to cover is going to be A100-2. It looks like a little card like this, and it has to be on public display of any certificated aircraft. And that's just kind of a rule with the FAA on anything. If you have a certificate, just like the one here at this school, or at a 145 operation or a 121 operation, there has to be a place where the public can view that certificate. In this case, the A100-2 is the certificate for the airplane that says that it is airworthy, and it met all of the requirements of the FAA before it went into service. Now, you can't fill one of these out. You simply, whenever you buy an airplane, you register it to yourself, and it's good for, currently it's 7 years. So there for a while, it was like 30 years or some long period of time. They went down to, it was only good for 3 years, and then created a bunch of problems. So now they're up to 7 years. So every 7 years, if you're an airplane owner, you have to get a new one of these to make sure the FAA knows that you still own the plane and all that good stuff. So the biggest thing that you need to know as a mechanic on this is it has all of the information that you potentially need. So if you look on this one, it will say like, hey, look, it is, there's your registration number. This is who makes it, the model number, the serial number, and the category that it's approved for. So in our case, the Learjet was a transport category with a serial number of 143, and it's a Gates Learjet 25B. Down here at the bottom is just the approval authority, and in the middle we'll give you just kind of terms and conditions and authority and basis for guidance and issues, just kind of formality stuff. You don't necessarily need to know it. The big takeaway with this one is to know that it has to be on display inside of the aircraft for it to be legal to fly. I've met a few different private pilot guys that own their own airplane, and the DPE comes out to give them a check ride. The first thing they do, they look at the airplane and they fail them, and the reason being is because they didn't have their airworthiness certificate on full display. It was tucked away here, in the cot or in the glove box or whatever. Or the next we're going to discuss is, let's say you have an aircraft that you're responsible for in some way, shape, form, or fashion, and something happens. You run over a taxiway light, it gets hurt, or in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And you look at the damage and you realize that it's going to take a little bit of work. This is not something that is going to be covered in the maintenance manual. You're going to have to really kind of dig into the structural maintenance manual and really start to understand how to repair it. Or maybe it took out an entire component, like it just took off the engine, and now you have to replace the engine. Any sort of major alteration or repair will cause for this form to get filled out. FAA Form 337. Now, here in a second, we're going to fill one out, just kind of line by line, let you see what it looks like. But this is something that you need to be comfortable with doing, because anytime that anything major happens, you're going to be the one having to sit down and fill it all out. There's several layers to it. You can't just simply return an aircraft to service for a major alteration or repair if you're an A.M.P. So whenever you graduate the school, you still have another 30 months before you're eligible to get your IA to be able to complete this form. And so you're going to end up having to submit it to somebody, send it off. And that IA or repair station or designee or whoever that's going to actually be putting the final checks on it is going to want to make sure that you did it correctly. And so to save yourself some time and some embarrassment, it's best to figure it out now. And we're going to give you plenty of chances to fill out a FAA Form 337 based on some sort of repair that you had to do.
Okay, so this is FAA Form 337. Now we're going to fill it out together. All right, so we're going to start with block 1 right there and go ahead and put our registration number in. So in this case, we're just going to make something up to make it work. All right, we talked about the effectivity. In this case, where our serial number is going to go in there, and that's important because it'll tell whoever is reading this what parts or what and what's effective for what. Our make-believe airplane is going to be a Lockheed Martin F-16. So we're going to go ahead and put our model and make in there. Then we're going to put what series of F-16 is. So in this case, it's going to be the Alpha series. And then the next step in the form is just simply to plug in who owns the plane, who's operating this thing. All right, and then we skip the block number 3 there, and we're going to go straight down into block 4 and 5 and start picking. Okay, so we talked about repairs and alteration. This is where we denote if we are making a major repair or a major alteration. In our case, we're going to be doing an alteration on the power plant. Different aircraft can have different makes and models of engines, just like you can in a car. So in our case, we have the Pratt and Whitney, specifically the 229, and we just make up a serial number for it because it's a make-believe plane. I'd love to own an F-16, but not going to own one today. Okay, down here in the conformity statement, we're going to say who it is we work for and all of their information. Or if you're an independent guy like myself, maybe you're the organization and you're just going to put your information in there. Now I'm a U.S. certified mechanic, so I'll make that block, and then I'm going to put my A.M.P. number in here, or whatever my certification is, with the A.M.P. number. It's a lot more numbers than that, but that'll work for our purposes here today. And finally, we're going to make our mark right here and make sure that everyone knows that we're proud of our work with our fancy signature. Now you'll notice that block just to the left, that's for extended range fuel tanks. If you were going to fab up some fuel tanks, put it where the passengers sit, you would check that box. But we're not going to do that today, so we're not going to worry about it. We're just trying to figure out how to fill out this form. Okay, the next step in the process is the approval authority. Now, we're going to say that it got approved, but I can't return anything to service on a 337 because I'm not a inspection authorization. So we have to get somebody who is, and it just so happens that we have old Bill Smith hanging out, and he's going to mark our 337 to be approved for us, and he's going to stamp our paperwork, and that's how we're going to get back in the game. Okay, so on block 8 on the back, we put our registration number and our date that we did the work, and then here we're going to start to talk about the major repair or alteration that we did. Now we want to have a good narrative that basically says, hey, look, this was the condition that caused that sort of maintenance to be done, and we're going to say this is what we did in accordance with whatever gave us the instructions to do it. Remember, we don't do any unauthorized or undocumented maintenance. There has to be something that tells us to do a thing. Don't just kind of go all Wild West. In this case, it's going to be our Pratt & Whitney maintenance manual. And for this, just like with many things, there are follow-on functional tests that need to happen to make sure the engine is good to go before the airplane or the airplane is released for flight. So we're going to annotate that in here in accordance with whatever maintenance manual is calling for those functional checks, and whoever actually does those functional checks can find it, so that way they can complete the maintenance for us. Now, lastly, and probably most importantly, well, I don't know if it's most important, but it's definitely an important feature. You need to put the I certify statement here, just like you would a logbook. Now, this is a write up that I basically copied out of the Lear, and they did it a little bit differently, but it effectively says the same thing. My recommendation to you is just to go into Part 43 and copy exactly what's in there, modify it to your to meet your situation, but you can't go wrong with doing exactly what the FAA told you to do. Um, yeah. And just like all of our maintenance entries, we're going to put the date, and then we're going to sign it. It's basically putting our stamp of approval on what's happened. And just like with any other write up that you're going to do, make sure you put your certificate number in there. Now, one thing that Block 8 is missing here that they didn't do whenever I copied this over is put a pre-closure statement on there to make sure that everything is removed from that area. Finally, just good practice to draw a line and write in, so that way no one can come behind you and write anything up that you then are responsible for, since you've put your signature and stamp on. But yeah, that's the 337.
All right, so FAA Form 8130-3. Let's say during that repair, you have to replace a part. You order a part, it comes in. It's going to come with a little slip of paper, and that little slip of paper is going to look just like this. It's going to say that it is the authorized release certificate. The 8130 is not something that necessarily you have to fill out. Technically, there could be a situation where you're working at a place that you do fill them out, but that's going to be kind of rare for you guys. The more realistic situation is that it comes with a part, and you have to take this and you have to maintain it. Sometimes these are just kind of formalities that once you get the part, especially if it's some sort of like consumable type part, maybe you don't need to keep up with it as or it's not as important. But most of the time, whenever you get a part in, this is going to go in a logbook. The Learjet has like 2 or 3 massive folders full of all of these 8130s. Here's 2 of them in the sleeve that I pulled out just as an example. You can see how the form has changed over the years. It went from being portrait to landscape sometime in the early 2000s with one of the revs. But essentially, all it really tells us is, this is who produced the part, this is the description, part number, eligibility, how many quantity, the batch number, all that good stuff. And then it'll give you remarks on basically says, hey, look, this is approved for flight, and it's good to go. And it's part of the FAA's quality system for supply chain. What you don't want to have happen is do all this work on an aircraft just to put like bad parts on there. It'll get airborne, and the bad parts do bad part things. They break and fall apart, and just kind of invalidate all that work and make it an unsafe condition to fly. Okay, so the last form we're really going to dig into is this form. It's the 8010-4. Now, the 8010-4 is how the FAA aggregates maintenance information for kind of like a cautionary tales, or if you remember, we studied maintenance alerts. Well, this form is how a lot of those maintenance alerts get started. If you say, like, we had this problem with this one part, it's not to an 80 level, type of concern, but it's something that could go wrong with it that maybe you should look at. If you have this part number, or a serial number that's close to this or in this range, maybe this is something that you should look at. All that information comes from filling out this form. Now, it's pretty easy to fill out. It's pretty straightforward, and it doesn't necessarily need the same level of granular professionalism that a lot of the other like logbook types forms require. However, because like this is actually, you're going to basically let the FAA know that, hey, look, there's a problem, and here's my phone number. Call me if you want some more details. And if there's something that's concerning to them or interesting to them, they're going to call you up and say, like, hey, look, you submitted this. What's the story with that? And then from that, they'll let everybody else know if they feel it's.
Okay, so let's fill one out together. Let's go to the top here, and we'll get started with our ATA code. Now, our ATA codes we'll be going over in class on a daily basis, so by now you should be pretty familiar with them, and maybe not having them memorized completely yet, but there's that. The operational control number you don't really want to mess with. That's for the FAA. Okay, so the next step is going to be plugging in our tail number on there that we made up from our F-16. And then we're going to go say, okay, like, what's our power plant? Uh, it's going to be our Pratt and Whitney 229, and with its made up serial number. Okay, then we're going to drop down here to the part that's actually causing the problem. That it was going to be a cowling. There's our part number. We're going to put the serial number in, and then we're going to give it a location. Now, if you look in the AC, it'll just say like, oh, left hand, right hand, or something like that. But we want to be a little bit more professional. We want to kind of train ourselves to be good aircraft mechanics on heavy commercial aviation. So we're going to put a 3-point location. I just made one up. So we're going to say it's on this side, and then here's our station number, our water line, our right butt line number, and that would give us a three-dimensional location, like a coordinate grid system to go exactly where that part's at, so there's no mistaking what we're talking about. Now, we got so excited earlier that we skipped over a little bit of the form, but we want to go back in and fill in blocks 2 and 4 and let everybody know, hey, look, we have a Lockheed Martin F-16 A series. Here's our serial number, and we don't have a propeller to worry about. Then we can kind of move on with filling out the rest of the form. Now, the next thing we want to do is put the date that we are submitting the form in there, so that way the FAA knows that, hey, look, this thing has happened on this date. Now, on block 8, it's just like on the 337. That's where we're going to put our narrative. You want to try to be as descriptive as you possibly can. Tell them exactly what happened, what the story was. And if you have an idea of what the probable cause is and kind of give them a place to look and start investigating, then you want to put that on there. So in our example, our F-16 was flying right along. We heard some rattling, then a big pop. And then when we landed, the cowling was gone. It just had pulled apart. And then we started looking at it. We saw that a Zeus fastener had given way, and whenever it sort of gave way, it caught the wind and just ripped it right out. And so we want to make sure that we put all that detail in there, so that way, whenever if they decide they want to build a maintenance alert out of it, or they want to investigate further, or whatever the follow-on action is, they have as much information to go on, because ultimately we don't want it happening to anybody else. This is all about flight safety. Okay, so the next thing is that we want to say, hey, look, this is the date that the accident happened on, whether it's an accident or an incident, and put the date there, so that way they can know how to track it. Then the next bit is I would go and select on that right hand side mechanic, put an X there because I'm a mechanic. Then I would put my name and my telephone number on there. You don't have to worry about the operator designator, because the FAA will fill that out whenever they call you to try to figure out exactly what was going on the day that this happened. But that is how you fill out the 8010-4.
Okay, so now that we know how to properly document our major repairs or alterations, one may wonder exactly what constitutes what's major and what is just preventative maintenance. Well, as we stated before, there's a certain element of obviousness whenever something that's just like way out there, which is way out of the blue. But some of these things can be a little bit more gray. So my suggestion is to go to Part 43, Appendix A, and there's a list of everything that the FAA considers to be a major or major alteration or major repair. So, like, if you're inspecting an aircraft and you find that something's wrong, and you're gonna have to like change this part out, it's really good just before you start kicking off onto the repair or alteration, just to skim through there and see what some of those things may be. So I've got Appendix A pulled up on my laptop right here. We're just going to talk through a few of them. So major alterations, airframe major alterations says alterations of the following parts and alterations of the following types, which are not listed in aircraft specifications issued by the FAA, are airframe major alterations. So here are the following parts: wings, tail surfaces, fuselage, engine mounts. Engine mounts are one that will go bad pretty regularly. Control systems, landing gears, whole or floats, and the list goes on a long way. And I would encourage you to look that up and become familiar with it, because you might have situations, especially on the oral and practicals, where they say, "Hey, look, is this a major alteration or a major repair that you need to do a 337 for?" And you'll have to go and look that up. You have to know how to do it. So the thing to remember is Part 43, Appendix A. It has all that stuff in there. Power plant major alterations. Conversion of aircraft engine from one approved model to another, involving changes in compression ratio, propeller reduction gear, impeller gear ratios, or the substitution of major engine parts which require extensive rework and testing of the engine, which is a lot. It means that if you're trying to do an engine upgrade, so let's say you had a Cherokee 140 and you want to go to a Cherokee 180, you would probably be able to do that. I think there's enough room in there to increase the engine size, depending on what model of 140 you have. But that would require a 337 because it's a major alteration to the airframe. Let's look at some more. Propeller major alterations, changes in hub design, changes in blade design. Let's say you had a Super Cub, and you've got just the standard Super Cub blades, but you wanted to upgrade it to one of those new, really aggressive carbon fiber props to really get as much performance as you can. That's a major upgrade or a major alteration to the propeller, and it would require a 337. If not, it's probably an STC kit. But, appliance major alterations. Says alterations of the basic design are not made in accordance with the recommendations of the appliance manufacturer or in accordance with the FAA airworthiness directives or appliance major alterations. In addition, changes in basic design of radio communication, navigation equipment approved under type certification or technical standard order that have been affect frequency, stability, noise level, sensitivity, selectivity, distortion, spurious radiation, AVC characteristics, or the ability to meet environmental test conditions, and other changes that have been have an effect of the performance of the equipment are also major alterations. So if you're going to do something like that's really out there with the radios, that's a major alteration to the appliances. Major repairs. So airframe major repairs. The following parts of an airframe repair of the following types involving the strengthening, reinforcing, splicing, and manufacturing of primary structural members of the replacement when a replacement is fabricated by such as riveting or welding are airframe major repairs. So, okay, what would that constitute? Box beams, monocoque or semi-monocoque wings or control surfaces, wing stringers, spars, spar flanges, and the list goes on pretty extensively, even down to wheels and axles. Pretty much anything that if you're going to modify it, it's probably going to be a major repair. Or if you've damaged it and you're trying to like put it back together through some sort of creative means, then you're going to be in a major repair territory pretty quick. Okay, power plant major repairs. There's only actually just 3 of these, so let's just go look at these 3. Special repairs to structural engine parts by welding, plating, metallizing, or other methods. If you have to weld a block, that's going to be a major repair. Separation or disassembly of the crankcase. So if you're going to like take the crankcase apart and then equip it with other than spur type propeller reduction gearing. So if you're going to try to mod the propeller reduction gear up front, that would be a major repair. Separation and disassembly of the crankcase or crankshaft of a reciprocating engine equipped with the integral supercharger. So it has a supercharger that's integrated into it, and you crack the case on it, that's a major repair. Okay, propeller major repairs might be retipping, shortening, inlay work, replacement of tip fabric. So pretty much anything to do with the old wood propeller is just going to constitute a major repair. But you want to make sure that even with aluminum ones or carbon fiber ones, you want to make sure that you look over this before you start doing anything drastic, because you might be a major repair territory and require additional documentation. Okay, appliance major repairs, a lot of it is calibration and repair of instruments, calibration of radio equipment, rewinding the field coil, complete disassembly of complex hydraulic power valves. That's another one that you'll do. Those are all major repairs for appliances. Now, preventive maintenance can be the removal, installation of tires, replacing electric shocks, servicing, replacing, lubrication, basic stuff that like you're going to do on a regular basis is all preventive maintenance. If it's designed to keep the aircraft flying by just maintaining its current status, most likely it's going to be just a preventive maintenance step. If you find it on the 100-hour lubrication list, it's going to be all preventive maintenance. But either way, Part 43, Appendix A is the place to go to answer any questions that you may have over what's a major repair, major alteration, minor alteration, or preventive maintenance. Now, who's responsible for doing this? Well, you are, because you're the one that's doing the work. You're the guy that is supposed to show up and be like, hey, look, this is what we're doing, and like you're going to be held liable for making the right call. That like, hey, look, just because an oil change is preventive maintenance, all right? You know that, and you can probably go pull this up in Part 43, Appendix A, and know that. However, if you decide, hey, look, I'm going to go do some kind of crazy work, and then you decide not to fill out the 337, get it approved, and return to service correctly, and something happens, well, that's on you. Or even if they just catch the paperwork, like they're coming after you because you're the one that's responsible for making the right call on not only just the maintenance, but also the paperwork side of it, so that way it can be properly documented. All right, so the last thing to cover for this video is FAA approved airworthiness limitations. Now these are covered in Chapter 4 of any maintenance manual, and it'll cover things like the life limited parts, both in time and in flight hours, as well as balancing different flight controls and any other parts variation that may limit the amount of time that the aircraft is actually airworthy. Now, a lot of times these numbers are extremely high, in the tens of thousands of hours a lot of times, and it's not something that you may ever really even encounter, but you might. You might find yourself working on extremely old aircraft or in a shop that niches down into, say, just Lear 25s, which are 50 years old and they've seen a lot of flight time. Or you might have parts in there that have a lower life limit and might actually be getting close time to replace it. Your job as a mechanic is to, when you get a new aircraft in that you've never seen before, is to go through that chapter and make sure that the total time on the airframe and the engines and all the different components and appliances get nowhere close to those ATA life limits. So that way, and if they are getting close, to advise the owner on, like, hey, look, this is what the maintenance manual says, this is where you're at, this is what it's going to cost, and then make a recommendation of, like, we should replace it, we should sell the airplane, or we should do something different. But the one thing that you absolutely cannot do is let the aircraft overfly that, because then we can't ensure that it's actually safe to fly anymore.